God. We're really thrilled to welcome this guy back to Austin. He was here a couple years ago for his hit record, and it's a really cool program. You have to check that out. Hitrecord.org. Hitrecord.org. Yeah, this film is just it's just perfect. I mean, it's funny, it's kind of witty, the performances are ridiculous, just across the board. And this guy, he's multi-talented, and for this film, he's multi-hyphenate. This is the director, the writer, and before I do it, I have to thank someone before we do this. Relativity brought us this film, and let's give a big hand to Relativity for buying this. The writer, the director, and the star of Don John, Mr. Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Say too much about this movie. Anybody excited to see it though? Wait, hold on. I want to do something. This is such a beautiful cinema. Wouldn't you say? This is one of my favorite things about Austin is this room. Hold on. 1 second. You guys make some noise, like look like a lively crowd so we can that look good. My favorite kind of movies are the ones that spark a conversation. I'm going to be back here with a couple of members of the cast to have a conversation when the movie's done, so stick around. By the way, Brie Larson and Tony fucking Danza are here. All right. Have a good time. I think you like it. Enjoy the show. People that worked on the film. First of all, the producer, Ron Bergman, ladies and gentlemen. Playing my sister, Ms. Brie Larson. And of course, the one and only, the national treasure, Tony Danza.
This crowd loved your movie. How did you come up with the story?
Well, yeah, first of all, look, I'm not gonna lie, you're the best crowd that's ever seen this movie. That means a lot to me, so thanks. How did I come up with it? Well, I wanted to tell a story about how people objectify each other and how media often sort of contributes to that, especially when it comes to love and sex. You know, we learn a lot of expectations from movies or TV shows or commercials or magazines or pornography, and really those expectations are unrealistic and maybe not so healthy, and if we're busy comparing our own lives and our partners to those expectations, we're doomed, totally doomed. And really, what love is to appreciate what's unique about somebody, not what's similar to some fictitious character that you've seen in a movie or in pornography.
So who's got a question? Right here. Oh, Bree. I'm sorry, Bree. Please.
First of all, love the film. That's my first time seeing it. Really fantastic. I feel like part of this festival is we have a lot of either filmmakers or people who want to make their first film. I also would love to make my first film.
She's made a couple short films.
Thank you. Thank you. This is his time. But I was curious, Joe.
Yeah.
Can I call you that?
Certainly, Bree.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering, what was kind of the moment that kicked off for you that you wanted to go? Because it's a long, hard journey in order to make a first film. What was it? Because I feel like I write a lot and can't decide what the first step will be of, this is the script, this is the film that I want to make.
That's a good question. Well, first of all, I've made a whole ton of short films and videos over the years, as you're doing, which I think is totally, and I never want to stop doing that. I love the short form. You know, it was my 21st birthday when I first got myself a copy of Final Cut Pro and started editing. And now I'm 32, so I've been doing it for a long time. And I've tried.
Long time.
Yeah, that's
Sorry, Joe.
I love you, Tony. So I tried writing other scripts before, and I wrote I finished one other one, but it was really kind of more of an experiment than a movie that I could see trying to leverage all this work from all these people and spending other people's money and all that. So this was the first thing I'd ever written, the first story that really felt like it had to be a feature-length film, and that to me made sense. Like, oh wow, I could see this becoming a movie and seeing lots of people liking it. So I don't know if that's kind of a vague answer, but sort of just
Fantastic.
Yeah. All right.
And then,
All right.
okay, who's got a question? Right here in the stripes.
I loved it. Congratulations.
Thanks.
I think we all loved it. I'm a writer and I've written for Pitch Magazine and other publications of that nature. I was really struck by the gender politics, and I'm wondering, if you're sort of attuned to that in your own life. And right now, feminism is kind of a dirty word. Do you consider yourself a feminist?
I'm going to repeat the question. The question is about gender politics. Do you consider yourself a feminist? It's very evident in the film that it's involved in.
Absolutely. And I think that it's important to think about gender roles for women and for men. I mean, it's irrefutable that historically women have gotten the raw end of the deal, no doubt, and have been oppressed and suffered a lot over since the beginning of history. But I also think it's true that both men and women today, especially, are sort of corralled into roles based on their gender that are not necessarily helpful. That's not to say that I don't believe in the difference between a man and a woman. There's an obvious biological difference, and I think I have womb envy. Yeah. Doesn't that sound amazing to have a baby inside you? I don't know. Sorry, I'm weird. Look, my mom and my dad were very active in all sorts of movements in the 60s and 70s, and feminism was certainly right there at the front. And my mom definitely brought me up when we were watching movies, or for example, like whenever we're watching the Lakers as a family, every time, to this day, the Laker girls come on, my mom goes, so that's what women can do, huh? Like, these guys are these great athletes, and women are just like, oh, look at our body, every time. She was saying that when I was 6, she said it last week. She and she's right. Maybe one day we won't have cheerleaders at basketball games, So yes, I guess the answer is yes. It's something I've thought about a lot, and I think especially when it comes to movies. Let's be honest, Hollywood sometimes really sucks for women, and there is a lot of there's a lot, and men, there's a lot of gender roles that I think are reinforced in a lot of Hollywood movies that I think are really problematic. I don't know, I'm curious to ask Bree or Tony, both of you actually would have different perspectives.
I like the Laker girls.
I don't have a problem with the Laker girls, I'm just saying. Maybe I do. I have a problem with the concept. It's not the individual girls themselves.
Kind of in what we're just all, I think this is an interesting topic of conversation to kick off this movie. Thank you for that question, and very interesting. There's something that I noticed in watching this film, and that there's this kind of constant idea in conversation that a beautiful woman becomes public property, and that because she's beautiful and walks on the street, that anybody gets the opportunity to look at her because she's flaunting it. And I'm not really sure where I stand on that. A beautiful woman is obviously a nice thing to look at, but we do forget about the inner part of it. And this film brings up a lot of interesting questions about that.
And you know, I think that Joseph, you're right though, that it does go both ways. That I think, you know, I have daughters too, so I mean, I think there's women trying to live up to what they think they're supposed to look like as well. So it's, I think that's what's so great about the movie, that it just, it makes you laugh, and then it makes you talk about this stuff.
Cringe.
Yes. Why am I laughing at that?
Next to my mom. Who's got a question in the balcony? Oh, right here, sir.
I want to say, Tony, you are still the boss. Keep doing this shit, man. I get a lot of ladies like yourself, but I was wondering if you have any advice for a cowboy like myself who has his own addiction. I can't stop waiting, man.
You're on your own, pal.
Okay.
But thanks for the opening. That's what I'm
Right here. The question was for Joe. Of all the characters that you played, is this one you related to the most?
No, probably not. But you know, I really love playing characters that are very different from myself. You know, like Ron produced the movie Looper, and you know, that's the character. First of all, he had a different face than my face, a different voice than my voice. He walked differently. He killed people for a living, and he was completely different from me. He was an orphan, and that fascinates me, putting myself in someone else's shoes. You know, the most time I ever spent in Austin, I was shooting a movie called Stop Loss. This is in 2006, and I was playing a U.S. soldier, and I was brought up, like I said, by peace activists. So the last thing I was ever going to be was a soldier, but I loved putting myself in that point of view and getting to know guys that, you know, were soldiers, and not just judging them and not saying like, oh no, they're perpetrating an evil war, but instead, you know, because I found like those guys, a lot of them were just kind of like doing their best to survive, and it was more the old men I came away from being mad at. Anyway, that's a tangent. Point I'm making is I really loved growing some empathy for these guys that were so different from me, that had an upbringing that was so different from mine, and whose life was so different from mine. And you know, John Martello is a very different guy from me, and especially at the beginning of the movie has very different values than I was brought up to have. And I really I enjoyed putting myself in that shoes and not trying to judge him, not trying to just call him a bad guy, even though at the beginning of the movie especially he's a douchebag. but just trying to get myself into that headspace and understanding it, and then hopefully finding, you know, a story where by the end of it he is starting to come out of his shell and maybe be less of a douchebag.
By the way, when Joseph called me and asked me to be in the movie, he said to me, "Hey, Tony, you think I can play Italian?" I said, "Yeah, that's what's wrong with you, you rotten kid. You can play anything."
I think we all agree. Right there in the middle. The question was, why was Don John so connected to his church? Why was religion such a factor?
Sure. Well, you know, I wanted to paint a picture of a guy that objectifies everything in his life. Women, for certain, but also his own body is an object that he, you know, wants to be a certain way. His apartment, his car, the way he treats his family, the way he treats his friends, and even his own, you know, church is something that he's not really present with, but that he's sort of just going through the motions and doing what he thinks he's supposed to do. And you know, it's not so much that I wanted to criticize the Catholic Church in particular, and certainly a lot of people have very fulfilling relationships with organized religion. But I think a lot of people also just sort of go through the motions, and I thought that was applicable to this story.
I have a question for Bree and Tony here, because you're working with an actor-director. Does it feel different than other directors you've worked with? Is it a different sensitivity, different process?
Me, yes. Well, I think first of all, anytime you have an actor that's a director that's been an actor, he certainly has a little bit more empathy for what the process is. But Joseph, Joseph and I did a movie together 20 years ago called Angels in the Outfield. And even then, by the way, he was following the director. And I'd say, come on, Joe, let's go skate. And he'd say, no, I'm following the director. I have to see what lens he's using. But he has, first of all, he's worked with how many movies he's done and the stuff he's done, but also the great directors. Just the last year, the 3 directors you worked with, Spielberg, Nolan, and Ryan, right? So pretty good people. So he's been able to, he's smart enough to grab from each one of them. But he's very sure-handed. He knows what he wants. He wrote a great script. I mean, everybody's talking about his directing and the acting, but he wrote that. So that's really the thing. And so when you, so I don't know if you can make a generalization, but in his case, he's very sure-handed and I haven't been on a movie set in a while, and he made it pretty easy for me, so it's great. Thank you.
Back there in the middle. Yep.
Okay, great. Hi. I have a follow-up question about the religion. I am actually a pastor, and I found it very fascinating, the process of your character going for confession. And it seemed like there was a progression, there was transformation for him, but that relationship also felt very one-sided. That he was vulnerable, he was becoming more vulnerable. And in the last scene, it felt like the character was disappointed and let down. And I wonder what you might have to say about that, and if he was hopeful for a more intimate relationship with his spiritual director.
The question sort of addresses the process by which he was connecting to religion throughout the film, and at the end, in his last interaction with the priest, his sin let down by the priest and by the religion. So, is there a more hopeful place to go with it?
Sure, and she also said she's a pastor, which is really interesting to me. I'm really glad to hear that you appreciated it and you liked it. You really nailed it, actually, because what you said is it was a one-way relationship, and that's really right at the crux of what I was trying to get at with everything in this movie. That's kind of another way of saying, I keep saying they're objectifying each other, and it's sort of the same thing. It's like, it's one way. They're not connecting. And, that's why a central symbol of this movie is a guy watching pornography, because it's purely one way. There's no interaction between the guy and the woman on the screen. But it's the same thing with like the family dinner scenes. These are people that are kind of talking at each other, but not really listening to each other. And same goes with the buddies at the beginning. And certainly John and Barbara, I think, aren't really listening to each other. They're sort of on separate pages. And I think that's the same goes with John and his priest. And yeah, you're right. At the last scene, after he's sort of beginning to open his mind up, and he's had a few conversations with Esther, which are unlike any conversations he's maybe had in his life.
How great is Julianne Moore in this movie?
Then he tries to sort of connect with the priest and tries to have a bit of a two-way conversation. The priest doesn't really reciprocate, and I'm not saying that all priests are like that. I imagine from just a little bit you and I are speaking that you're more receptive to a more two-way connection with the people in your congregation are also, and that's great. And look, I'm not trying to make any kind of blanket statement about organized religion. I know people that have great and fulfilling relationships with their organized religions, for sure. But it's not always like that.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Bree, you in this movie spoke in one scene, but you had so many memorable moments. Can you talk about how that went?
I would totally.
How much research did you
I
do?
prepared for 3 years for this film. I was born to play. Thank you very much for that. That felt really nice. Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, my favorite part of acting is listening, and I feel like I had the most incredible opportunity to go to work every day and to do nothing but just watch these amazing actors. I got to see everything and so much that I wish you guys could have seen, and even more. And it just was an amazing experience for that. Made a lot of pressure for that one line to come. And all of a sudden I went, do I have an accent? Is my accent correct? And then it was done, and I went, did I do it? I did it, okay, it's fine. But actually, Joe was so great about actually working with me of bringing it to the smallest, most minute sort of look possible. I think with me not having much to do but listen, I think I had the tendency to want to give justice to the material and really do something and like show him that like I can do this and maybe try and get some tears in, or like get a fan on me or something kind of fantastic. But he was like, let's get the fan out of here. Wipe up those tears, it's not necessary for this. And I felt like I got to learn so much about the power of a glance, and it's really incredible, especially when you're seeing it so big. It is amazing how a blink or just a blank stare can say so much.
If you watch like Buster Keaton movies, while some of his stuff is really big, a lot of my favorite Buster Keaton moments are tiny little facial things, and I see a lot of that in her performance in this.
Nailed it. We've got time for 2 more questions. Up in the balcony, I see one way up at the top. Yes, there's you, sir.
So there's a big send-up of like the Jersey Shore MTV culture. Do you feel like that films like this are the best way to combat that?
As the film serves sort of as a send-up of the Jersey Shore culture, is this the best way to combat that douchebaggery? I think was the term.
To tell you the honest truth, I had never seen Jersey Shore before. I did watch it after I gave the script to a few people to read, and people kept bringing it up, so I figured out how to watch it. I couldn't really get through much more than one episode. And by the way, I should say, honestly, I don't think that's the fault of the people in the show. The truth about reality TV is it's no more real than this. It's completely fabricated and fictitious. It's just done so in a sort of different method. So I really wouldn't, blame any of the
Joe, I mean, really, if you were 22 and they said, hey, go down to the beach, act out, and we'll pay you, I'd be afraid to see the footage. So, it's the suits that put that stuff on.
So last question, somebody got a water bag.
If everybody just wants to ask it once, maybe that would be.
I'm sorry. So there's a lot of themes of addiction in the film: addiction to technology, addiction to sex, and addiction to controlling people, like with character Barb. And in the final scene, do you think that she will she ever change?
Well, first of all, it's a really tough part to play because you end up sort of disagreeing and not liking the Barbara Sugarman character. But I'd like a round of applause for Scarlett Johansson. Nailed this part, and then she brought so much to it. All that stuff, her nails and her gum and all that, that's all her. Really great performance. And as far as, you know, whether or not the character of Barbara will change, that's a really good question, you know. I think, in my life experience, big, deep, fundamental changes like that happen usually as a result of some kind of trauma, something bad happening, you get your heart broken, or something else happens and sort of throws you off, and it makes you not feel so great about yourself, and then you start re-examining maybe some of the things you thought were true. And that sort of happens to John. He gets caught and dumped. It's never happened to him before. He ends up feeling terrible about himself, and I think because his self-esteem is sort of low, that's why he's a little more receptive to then some of these conversations that he has with Esther that lead to him beginning to break out of his shell. So, you know, Barbara, we don't see that happen to her, and I don't know, I could see it going either way. Maybe she'll meet someone who she thinks is Prince Charming, and she'll convince herself that she's happily ever after, and or maybe, you know, maybe something bad will happen to her. Not bad, but like maybe she'll be disappointed enough that she will eventually, you know, say like, geez, what's wrong? This isn't working, you know? And I would hope so. I think, you know, the Barbara Sugarman character is actually a really smart person, and you know, has a lot of admirable qualities to her. She's just sort of like John. She's trapped in a very narrow point of view that she gets from perhaps some of her upbringing. You know, you see in the princess party sort of where the ideas of femininity that are sort of thrust on girls at an early age, and she loves these, you know, Hollywood movies which offer unrealistic expectations for what, you know, love and a woman is supposed to be. But, you know, maybe she'll figure it out. I wouldn't put it past her.
All right, let's do one more round of applause.